Yeah, so look, tonight is really about taking the lessons from Kevin's wisdom and experience of 3 decades at least in this game around sales, presentation skills and negotiation as well. And distilling them back to what can we actually do? So what can we take away and implement tomorrow in our daily lives? And I realise, it's very specific to a work context, sales, negotiation, presenting. But also, I don't know about any of you, but I certainly feel like I'm negotiating with 2 terrorists, my 3-year-old and 5-year-old at home. And any skills that might help me in that department will be greatly appreciated. Look, I'll introduce Kevin again. I realise you've read his bio, but I think it's worth reiterating. And Kevin was inducted into the Australian Speakers Hall of Fame in 2011. He is a certified speaking professional, which is an internationally, or the highest internationally recognised accreditation of a professional speaker. He spent 30 years or more training, workshop leading, coaching, emceeing, all around those 3 key skills. And I'm really interested to see tonight the sort of, if I think of them as circles, the Venn diagram of the overlap of those 3 skills, and sitting right in the middle is that idea of influence. And hence, let's see if we can change the game. His clients include Microsoft, Cisco, Hilton, Singapore Tourism, Malaysian Ministry of Trade, and he's written 10 books. So I think we've got enough potential here to get started. So everyone, please, one more time, just welcome Kevin. Now, I'm a little bit curious. Who here has done some presenting? Okay, great, nearly everyone. Who here has had some success with their presentations? Okay. And who here has had a presentation go so far wrong that they want to leave the country? Okay, a couple. That's reassuring. So, concerning. I actually wanted to open tonight with a bit of a confession. I haven't even told Kevin. I've been holding this story away from Kevin, my speaking coach of so many years. But in 1998, and I sort of think of my speaking career as 2 things, pre-Kevin and post-Kevin. And in 1998, there was pre-Kevin. Pre-Kevin Toby was at the Australian Institute of Sport playing water polo, and I was a couple of months into that gig and pretty fresh to the squad. And the guys in my team volunteered me for the delivering of the water polo report to the athlete assembly. And I was like, okay, I've done some speaking at school. What's it all about? And they said, oh, look, mate, it's a pretty dry hour or 2. So really, water polo's had a reputation of just being funny. So go in, take the mic, and see how you go. And I was like, okay, cool. So I thought about it for a couple of days. Took my notes in, stood behind the lectern, and delivered my 2 or 3 minutes to the audience. It was probably 100 odd athletes and some staff and coaches. And my gags were shocking, to be frank. They were really quite inappropriate and had the water polo boys in stitches, but they weren't really necessarily a good gauge of the rest of the room. And I sort of stepped away from the lectern and thought, oh boy, I'm pretty sure I accepted the mark there, but I'll just be done. And felt like I'd impressed the guys who I was out to impress as well in the process, so that was a win. Then the next morning at training, the coach said, Toby, when you're finished getting changed, just pop into my office for a minute. Just want to talk to you about a few things. And at the time I thought, oh, nothing to it. This is what happened with coaches and athletes, and we all spent time in the office talking through training and what's coming. And so, I went, and he sat me down at a desk and TV screen, video player. And again, nothing out of the ordinary. I had, we did video review and feedback all the time, games, skills, whatever it might be. And then, of course, he said, so Toby, just before I hit play on this video, I just want you to think about the fact that the athlete assembly is recorded and it gets sent to the whole of the Australian Sports Commission and to the major partners of the AFS. Just reflect on that for a second and just watch hit play. And of course, probably the longest 3 minutes of my life, watching myself back making bungle after bungle. Fortunately, post Kevin and Toby arrived, and I met Kevin the next year at the Queensland Academy of Sport. He was giving public speaking training, and since then he coached me through my first paid MC gig. Adam Franklin, Adam is here somewhere, my business partner at Blue Wire, when we started teaching what we had learned and lessons we'd learned around digital marketing, I said, mate, we need to get Kevin back involved, and so Kevin came in, coached us through presentations and sales training as well at that point. And then most recently, I had a keynote in my latest business all around team performance, and I had this keynote about values-based decision making, which was a story that I was telling really for the first time. And I said, oh, Kevin, I need your help. And it's been a few years. And so in the course of 4 weeks and 4 sessions together, Kevin helped me craft that story from something that I think was going to be reasonable as a reasonably experienced speaker into something that was just a whole new level. And so mate, huge thank you for your guidance and coaching over the years, and you've got me this far. Here we are, so I'm really excited to dig into it today.
And I think probably one of the different things about you, Toby, because you've taken me back to remember all those sessions I did with the athletes, and I would have them stand up and deliver a presentation that would be recorded, and I would try my best to actually get them to review the video afterwards. And every one of them was totally comfortable with the concept of watching themselves performing at the highest level and using it as a way of analysing what had worked and what they could do better next time. But the principle of actually taking that model and actually using it for their own presentations was something 95% of them utterly refused to do. And the fact that you were brave enough to be able to look at that.
It's still pretty awesome, to be honest.
And those moments I think are important.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have some of my friends from my Toastmasters club here, and I've been in Toastmasters for over 30 years, and I still remember the very first presentation I did in front of a large Toastmaster audience. I thought it went well, and these 2 ladies, elderly ladies, came up to me at the end of the presentation and said, we'd like to congratulate you because we believe you've done very, very well. We've heard that this is actually your first presentation in front of a large group, and so you've done very, very well. We wanted to come up here and congratulate you, especially since obviously English is not your first language. I was so shocked I never actually got around to what they thought my first language was. And now, seeing as I do most of my speaking overseas, speaking to people who don't come from English as a first language, I feel the point of empathy there. We can connect with each other.
Everyone starts from somewhere.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about being an international speaker is, like, I really can leave the country. And decide later on that I want to go back on.
And mate, let's jump into that. Like, when was the last time it went wrong? And because now after 30 plus years, do presentations still go
wrong? Of course they do. Of course they do. What you hope is that the occurrence will be less often. And it was about 18 months ago, and it was my own fault when I look back, and it was the fact that I had simply not questioned the client closely enough.
Sounds like me.
Yeah. There were actually 2 clients, heads of department of 2 different departments of this large company. One person understood I was going to speak about, and what the other person understood I was going to speak about was totally different. So I basically had a room full of people where half of them expected one bunch of content and the other half expected a different bunch of content. Now,
what do you do with that?
I still don't know how to answer that question. Basically, I've just said to my agent, if you expect me to work for a company like that again, I expect a 50% premium and more time to discuss with the client. But yeah, if you want a deadly situation that still sent shivers down my spine, it was the morning tea break of the first day, and I went up to one of the managers there. Tori-san was his name. I'll give you some hint as to what country I might have been in. And I actually said to him I was concerned that maybe some of the group weren't getting what they were wanting. It would have been relatively easy for me to change the content if all of the group had actually wanted the same content, but they didn't.
Yep.
And so I went cap in hand to this gentleman, asking him to give me some advice about how I might make the experience more worthwhile for his employees. And his response was just one sentence, which is, there is nothing I can tell you which is going to make your presentation successful.
I was sincerely hoping I'd read one of those ones.
They're out there, they completely lack empathy with the sort of role that a speaker or a trainer has to play. It's not done out of ignorance or cruelty, it's just done out of lack of empathy.
Yeah.
But I think going back, it's always not asking the right questions.
Got you right at the start.
It's never anybody else's fault, it's always your own fault.
Yep. Responsibility, perhaps.
Taking responsibility, accepting the fact that you've got to make it work,
Yep.
but asking the right questions at the start.
Okay, lesson number 1. Ask questions. So, how did you actually get started speaking?
I stumbled into it the same way as everyone else that I know.
And what did that stumble look like? I mean, is this a high school stumble? Is this a university stumble?
It was a stumble in business when I was a sales manager, and all of a sudden they needed somebody to stand up and do a product launch.
Sure.
And they thought I did it better than other people, and so the role fell to me. And I was able to look back the last 2 employment positions I had before I went out on my own. I was actually employed because somebody actually put me up on the stage running a presentation.
Yep.
Somebody in the audience saw me and made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
Wow.
So it made me realise how important presentation skills is to your CV, to that skill set. I would do at least half of my training now with people who are in their 40s who really shouldn't be being taught the sort of skills I'm teaching them. They really should have known these a lot earlier. Some of them, maybe like you, had the last training they actually did was in high school.
Yeah.
And they're just realising it's one of the major factors that the schools their career to plateau. It's stopped them from going into.
Yeah. And so at the beginning, if you think back to, and perhaps your journey into Toastmasters and some of those learning processes as well around this.
I highly recommend Toastmasters. You've got to find the right Toastmasters club.
Okay.
Because you go into the role.
Are there any good ones here in Brisbane, given that we're all...
Oh, it's an excellent one. Not far from here. Meet on Monday mornings.
Yes,
where is it? Streaming. Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
And they are mostly business and professional people.
Yes.
And it's the great thing about Toastmasters, it's a community organisation that fills different roles for different people. And if you're the sort of person who might speak once in your life, where you're going to have to maybe speak at your son's or daughter's wedding, then probably going along to a club of mostly business people would not be right for you.
Yeah.
I've had people turn up to a club and come back 6 months later saying, I had to go and do a public speaking course, so I was qualified enough to walk into this club. Well, that's not the aim. It's meant to be able to give you a learning environment just like you.
And so, and in that sort of journey through to where you are now, and teaching the stuff and across these 3 different skill sets as well, what did you find was the Toastmasters being a great forum to learn, an environment and community? What else did you find as accelerators to learn this skill set?
Learning as much as you possibly could about the way that people perceive information nowadays and what they're likely to retain.
Let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Oh, the fact that people will remember images 8 times as long as they'll remember words. Okay. So are you showing them images, or are you painting images in their mind with the words that you're actually using? There's been research that's shown that if you use image-based words rather than concept-based words.
And what's an example?
Oh, a good example of that. I will never ask somebody to help me. I'll ask them to give me a hand. I'll never say we've got problems ahead of us. I'll say we've got hurdles we need to get over. Because it's putting an image in their mind that people can relate to. And I know that the research has shown that image is more likely to be retained.
Yeah.
but also the part of our brain, and the great Simon Sinek is probably the first person that articulated this for me. The part of the brain, the limbic brain, responsible for decision making, only processes images and emotions.
Okay.
Which brings me to the stage that I use in all presentation skills training, which is logic makes them think, emotion makes them act. And there's a lot of people who fall into the trap, and most of my training now is done with people who have a business presentation. A typical scenario might be, excuse me, you have 20 minutes in front of the board, in front of the panel, some of whom may be in the room, the rest may be coming in via a video link.
Yeah, I mean the context has changed dramatically.
Yeah, and you have 20 minutes to be able to present to them your business proposal, to be able to get them to approve it or not. And most of it is information transfer, and unfortunately all the focus goes on to information transfer, not recognising the fact that speaking to people is a really crappy way to transfer information. It's an incredibly powerful way to get people to change their minds, but it's a really bad way of transferring information. And so all of their focus goes on, if I can give you enough information, eventually you'll reach a tipping point where you'll be convinced. And of course, it simply doesn't work that way. Yeah. I've got to find ways of being able to incorporate the emotional content and the images, so as you feel right about that decision that I've justified to you with all of the information that I've given you. And this is very challenge.
Right? And particularly in a world that, you know, we were talking earlier, in a world where everyone has all the information at their tips, right? And in some part, this was a fundamental reason to put on this event, is that there is information everywhere. You know, what is, you know, how can we use this tool of speaking and negotiation and sales and you know, the skills we're going to unpack tonight, to actually make the human connection, which I think, yeah, nobody wants anymore.
Well, I think you can prioritise information in a time of information overload. People are overwhelmed with information.
Yeah.
I can remember when I first used to walk to a training room and people would be sitting there going, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I cannot wait. I'm going to learn so many new things. I'm going to walk out of here being so much smarter than before. Yeah. Nowadays, I walk into a room and people are sitting there going, oh, another training session. Oh, good. I didn't learn anything from the last training session. What makes them think I'm going to learn anything from this one? There are many other places I should be, there are many other things I should be doing. And so people are cynical. They don't value new information. And so if our job is to be able to transfer information in a way that's going to be retained, yes, then it's got to be done in a way that gets people to prioritise the information.
And actually, I'm really interested in your definition of what is influence, and say what is the difference between influence that we're talking about tonight and persuading.
I think you can get into the semantics of what is the meaning of each, and quite often they're coupled together. But I think that overlap, as you very accurately described at the start, of the three areas of sales, and I don't even think about sales as sales anymore.
How do you think about it?
I think about sales as decision facilitation.
Sounds like it's got a big one.
Sales is getting other people to make the decision that I want them to.
Yes.
Now, if I want to have an ongoing relationship with this person, then that's got to be in a way that's going to make them realise, maybe then, maybe later, that I did that with the purest of intent, with the intent of actually helping them.
Yeah, fantastic. And this was the point that we definitely wanted to touch on, which is around how, you know, what is intent and how important intent is.
Yes, and if you've ever looked at any of the work done by Robert Cialdini, Professor of Psychology at the University of Arizona, and probably the leading thinker in the world in the area of persuasion and influence, you're hearing...
Sorry, just to interrupt, are there any books or resources?
Many. He wrote Influence. Influence was the first book he wrote, which was about 6 influencing skills.
Okay.
That was about 12 years ago, I think he wrote that. Latest one that I'm aware of that he wrote were 50 influencing strategies and the scientific proof behind them.
And actually, this was another topic that's really interesting to me, and that we have again touched on in previous conversations, but it's the kind of evidence base that's underpinning and the changes that have happened in this realm. And you were, across your 30-year career, how have you seen the changes?
Oh, it's changing. I mean, the research,
What has driven that?
the research that's available now in the area of negotiation, which is a relatively new area of research anyhow, up until 30 years ago, they didn't even consider an area worth studying in universities. The biggest change is now we've got the science available to us where they can stick electrodes onto your head and actually see which parts of your brain are being enacted by certain outside influences. In the past, all our research was behavioural research. It was based on doing something to people and watching the way they behave. Because most of it came out of universities, my attitude was it's just the way that first year undergraduates behave, the ones that all the research is done on. So it was valuable, but sometimes the study groups were too small to give it any credibility. But now, I mean, they've, in Harvard Business Review 2 years ago, they were able to put electrodes on people's heads and see the parts of their brains were enacted when they were being told stories, when they weren't enacted by any other form of communication. And yet I still have people say to me, stories don't have a role in a business presentation.
Okay. And we'll definitely be coming back to storytelling. And because I think even reflecting on my most recent coaching experience with you, that was part of what you helped me do, was unpack the story to extract. And a lot of it was about removal and cutting away the stuff.
Well, that's what the speaking coach does, hopefully. You come to me with a piece of ore.
Yeah.
And in that ore are bits of rock and bits of gold and maybe occasional tiny bit of shit sort of in there. And it's probably there with very good reasons, but it takes the outsider to come in and say, let's clean it away, let's brush it off, let's identify the gold that's there, and then hopefully allow you to be able to put it together so it becomes a work of speaking craft. And as I said to you, as a coach, that's all I can do for you. And with this presentation that we've worked on with you, most of the responsibility now, because I believe you will give versions of that many, many times in the future.
Certainly hope so.
Is the only person who can take that from a piece of craft to a piece of art is you. And I think that's the true speaking journey. If you can give people a piece of speaking craft, they will be satisfied. But when you can turn it to art, it goes into true inspiration.
And how do you have any examples of art of your own?
Yes, I would think so. I'll be uncomfortable about calling it that.
Sure.
But
Perhaps
probably.
the immortals in the room might.
Yes. The best story I tell, or the most, best, I probably shouldn't judge that. The story that I tell that has the most influence is a story that took me 30 years to discover that it was actually useful in a business context. And it took me another 20 years to actually get it to a point where I believe it's good enough. And it's still going. So I work on the principle there's no such thing as a perfect speech. There's no such thing as a perfect story. Every time you tell them, there's an opportunity to find a way about how you can just have one tiny little touch that can make turn it from good to magic.
So one of my favourite anecdotes about Kevin is when we were early days, when he was teaching us, Adam and I remember, and he told us this story about how when he showed up to the World Championships for Toastmasters, he took two jackets, a light one and a dark one. And we said, oh, what's that about? And he said, well, I was going to choose the jacket depending on what colour the backdrop of the stage was. And to me, that's, the level of craft and detail that you've been.
Yeah, now I can take a dark jacket and let the hair do the rest.
Just amazing. And so I guess, to your point that the work is never done, and what was this story that you took 30 years to uncover the
The story was about my adoption. So I was adopted when I was 2 weeks old. The way that my parents told me about being adopted, and I'll share this with the group. I don't want to go into the whole storytelling sort of mode, but my parents said to me, Kevin, there are 2 ways that mummies and daddies can get their babies from the hospital. One way, mummy and daddy go into the hospital and the mummy has that baby, and that's their baby, and they have to take that home. And then there's the other kind where the mummy and the daddy get to go to the hospital and have a look at all of the babies that are on show there, and they get the chance to take out the best one. And that's how we got you. And the way I tell the story is, by the time that I'd actually realised that maybe that wasn't 100% true, I'd also realised that it was told with the best of intent. And what took me a long time to realise is, it was the story that I was told about my adoption that got me to look at that and see it as the luckiest moment in my life, where I'm totally aware of many other people with all sorts of justification. I'm not judging them. I think 3 years ago we had a national apology to those people who were adopted during those decades, who see it as an abandonment, who see it as a negative.
Yeah.
And so I use it as an example of how a story can cause people to see something totally, reframing something in a totally different way, to take something that's otherwise negative and get them to see it as being positive.
Incredible. Your parents must be great storytellers.
Or
they thought that through.
Yeah, they obviously did. So I don't know how they found it out. It was obviously very wise.
Yeah. Incredible.
And the one time that I was bullied, it was a great comfort to me. Because I saw him lying on the ground as after I've been hit, looking at this person walking off and thinking to myself, you must have been one of the ones your mother had.
And how do you help? How do you help your clients get to the core of their stories? Because I mean, that must just be so foundational to your emotional.
And again, this is where the 30 years experience and what I hope now is allowing knowledge and information to maybe get into the edge of wisdom is recognise the fact, and anybody who's familiar with the model of the Johari window knows there's the second quadrant of the Johari window, that part of you.
Walk us through the Johari window.
Johari window is the 4 aspects of our personality. Our open quadrant, that which we know about ourselves and others know about us. Yeah. Our blind quadrant, that which others know about us, we can't see. Our hidden quadrant, that which we know about ourselves that we don't share with others, your personal information that I'll probably argue you kept personal. That 4th quadrant that nobody knows, and they just find out about the autopsy. But what I'm most interested in is that 2nd quadrant, which is there is always going to be some aspect of me that others can see more clearly than I can, and for you as well. The best story is always your own story, as you found out. But you're often the worst person to tell it because you're so close to it. And you have the credibility because you're in the story, but you have the lack of perspective because you were in the story. And it needs somebody from outside to be able to say, that's valuable, that's university relevant, that's instantly applicable. People can't get that immediately. So that stuff, it's interesting that you told me that, but it doesn't help me understand it. It's slightly irrelevant information, and you saw me do that to you quite a lot. It's a big box. It's a big box we've got to put over there, and this is going to go into that box, and you've got to save it for next time.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not valuable, but not here. So it just confuses people.
Yeah.
And so you always need somebody else. I will always use my other cohort of professional speakers to run any new idea. Right parts, because I realise I'm just blind to certain aspects of that.
Awesome. We'll come back to how you craft a new presentation the process for that. But one thing I really wanted to touch on around the storytelling part that you really coached me on with this most recent one was in this most recent keynote, Kevin said to me in session number 1 or 2, he said, "Mate, you're telling this water polo story, and would you be open to taking a water polo ball up on stage with you?" And I sort of said, "Oh, that seems a bit, inane. Like, why would I take a water polo ball with me?" And then he said, "All you need to do with it is to hold it. And as soon as you put it in your hands, you'll be completely back in the zone where you were when, water polo has played such a massive part of my life, and sort of this crux moment in the Olympic Games that I'm talking about, and the ball lands in front of me." And he said, if you hold that ball, you'll be just telling the story from the story. I think you described it from the video that was running through my head. You had some language around it.
It takes you back into reliving the story rather than retelling the story. And if you can actually
There's the master.
When you can relive the story, you don't have to play any emotions. You don't have to. It happens. And what you need is simply the confidence to be able to allow yourself to go 100% into the story, and then when you come out of it, know where you are in the presentation, so you can get back on track. Because the thing that stops us is that we always like to have a little part of our brain focused on I've got to have this overriding theme that's going to allow me. We're paranoid about going off track. 10 years ago, I stopped worrying about going off track. And in fact, I would rather now people make me go off track. Because when I say on track, it's my stuff. When I go off track, it's responding to something that the audience has asked. And often, somebody might ask a question, and I initially started thinking, I can only go so far with the answer to this question, because if I go any further, I'll find it too hard to get back on track again. Now I just allow myself to go as far as is necessary, and still adding value to the person who's asked the question, because that's what they want to know. And I've realised I'm a very, very poor judge of what is most valuable to others. So that's why I want to be always keep it as a dialogue. Yeah. And here's a trick that I've found, and it always works, is if I ever do get totally off track, and I've no idea where I am, I'll see the audience and say, now before I started talking about that, where was I? And somebody always answers me. Always. And it's a wonderful reassurance, because at least one person. And it adds this air of spontaneity. Research was done with American audiences. Remember, this is American audiences. Used to see the Hollywood sort of speakers, the polished teeth, the perfect hair. They said to American audiences, what are the 3 things that you crave from speakers? And it actually shocked them when the National Speakers Association over in America did this research, because the 3 things that came through were vulnerability, authenticity, and spontaneity. And the concept of somebody being up on stage and being vulnerable was sort of counterintuitive to this perfect
script that had been used upon.
Yeah.
And how do you think then, you've given us some examples around spontaneity. Actually, sorry, can I just jump back? What's another example of a prop? Like, what's a prop that gets brought into a business meeting?
Well,
it's useful.
And I hope everyone else out there, when Toby started saying, he asked me to hold up a water polo ball, and I thought that was very, very strange. And I would expect everyone else out there to go, what? He said, how many years did you spend at the top level of water polo?
Fair while.
So if I put a water polo ball in your hand, are you going to hold it the same way as I am?
No.
Of course not. And it's going to show to the audience. It's just going to look natural in there. The way he's going to scroll from hand to hand it's just going to be natural and taps into something that you do without even thinking about it.
Yeah, so it was like a magic trick though. When I delivered the presentation, I was holding the ball. It was like a magic trick that I was just in flow, in the storytelling mode, or reliving the story rather than retelling the story. And it was And so I'm just interested in what are some other examples, given that perhaps not most of you will want to carry a water polo ball into your next meeting or your pitch or what have you. But what does it look like? What have you seen other people use?
There's this wonderful speech that won the Toastmasters World Championship about 4 or 5 years ago, where a person starts out with a rose and pulls the petals out of the rose to show how, if we listen to other people saying all the negative stuff, they can rip us apart. Throws it into a bin, and at the end of the presentation reaches back into the bin where he has another rose and pulls out the rose that's been put back together again. Talking about how if you talk to the right people and get the right support, then they will help you to be complete again. Somebody talking about a trip I did through India, and how one of the this person threw away a tiny little bit of food and had one of the I think probably the street beggars basically say to him, "Please don't throw that away." And ended up with a metal bowl with a handful of rice, allowing that rice to fall into the bowl, create the noise of the rice, and the handful of rice was the equivalent of a day's food for that boy. So what can you do to bring it into the room? We become so used to the PowerPoint slide and the image up there, and the right image can be incredibly powerful. Yeah. But it's something that's three-dimensional, something that's actually a functional part of what you're actually doing.
And have you seen it in a business context?
Oh, totally.
What's an example of that? So say someone was going to pitch an investor for a product or whatever. What do you take?
Last week, last week, working with an organisation in Singapore, one of the biggest land development corporations. And in Singapore, anybody who knows that place knows that when they build new land, they reclaim the land. And they're actually, and again, maybe the politicians here in Australia should listen to some of this, they have changed their land reclamation program. Singapore is now 25% bigger than it was founded in 1965 because of all reclaimed land that they've taken back from the sea. But they are now changing their land reclamation process to factor in sea level rises. So like all the intelligent people around the world who live on an island, they're realising that sea level rise is going to threaten us. There's no argument about whether they believe in the science or not. And the whole concept of believing in science shows me that people don't understand the difference between religion and science. Well, science is a belief system.
Let's go back from there.
Sorry, you're yeah, all right. But major government and corporation is changing its processes. And this lady in their presentation brought a beaker with sand in it to show how the process of using to compact the sand.
Wow. Okay.
Now, just a small example of that.
Awesome. It's really, some creative ways of using it, obviously.
Well, you've got 40% of your audience are primarily visual. They want to look at the pretty images. 40% are primarily auditory. They want to hear you. And the 20% are the kinesthetic ones. They want to see something they might be able to touch.
Yep.
I remember working with one of your colleagues once, and she had to do a presentation. And I said, the gold medal, where is it? Oh, in the soft drawer. And I said, have you thought about bringing it onto the presentation? Or do you think people would be interested? She was actually passing it around the room. I mean, there might have been the others that think, will I ever see it back again? But of course, most of the people in the room had never touched it in a big gold medal. It was a very special moment for them. Yeah. And their reaction was, do you think people will be interested? So I told her, do you think I should hold a water polo?
Let's jump into the actual, back to what you were touching on earlier, which is sort of building a presentation and building it from, whether it's from scratch or sort of taking, some rough notes. How do you go about that process? Like, where do you start?
Okay, work on the assumption, and again I've had a lot of resistance with this, that every presentation is a sales presentation. And people who don't have sales in their title or don't have sales as one of their KPIs, generally arc up with that, get quite negative and say, I don't do sales presentations. And I remember talking to a CEO once, and they said, why would you ask me to do sales presentations? What's my product? And I said, change. And she got it immediately, because as a CEO in today's world, you're constantly trying to sell change, and how well you sell that will determine how well the change is actually affected. So, let me ask the audience a question. How many speakers have you heard in the last 3 years? Would it be more than 50? Yep. Who can remember 5 of them? And if you can remember 5 of them, who can remember one thing that each one of them said? Beyond you, isn't it? So our greatest challenge as speakers should not be we're going to put ourselves through all of the stress and anxiety of delivering a presentation, and we might lose our way or have our mind go blank or leave something out. Our greatest worry should be the fact we're going to put ourselves through all of the stress and anxiety of delivering that presentation, and the second people that get out of the room, they've forgotten. Most speakers are forgettable. And so my aim would be, how am I going to not be forgettable? That's the bottom line. And if they do remember one thing that I said, that's going to make me better than the average of most speakers that they've heard. So if they're going to remember one thing, what's it going to be?
What's your one thing tonight?
My one thing tonight I had to put is influence is incredibly powerful, but it can only be used with the correct intent. Because every influencing skill that has been unearthed, everyone in this room will have seen examples of that influencing skill being used for evil. They will have seen it being used by manipulative salespeople. They've seen it used by bullies. They've seen it used by errant bosses. And the danger is we will assume that just because that technique is being used by others for evil, then the principle in itself is wrong. And it's not. It's the intent that actually counts. There's a movie around. It was around many years ago called Hitler the Great Seducer. It was an analysis of one of Hitler's great speeches. And every scientifically proven influencing tool we're aware of, he used. And that's why the evil genius tag, I think, probably fits very well. But it's all back to intent. There's nothing wrong with manipulation.
Can we explain it? Because I think manipulation often comes with baggage.
Example for me, whenever I'm visiting Singapore, which I spend a lot of time in, there at the Carlton shopping centre, there's a place called Bodyworks where Mr. K works. And anytime I get a chance, I will go down there, I will lie on the table and I'll even say it, Mr. K, manipulate me. Because the way that he manipulates me makes me feel better. It's manipulation with the right intent. Last week when I was working with this group of, these are the top graduates, cherry-picked from the best universities in Singapore, taken up by this company and offered cadetships, so as they can glean the best talent available. And they're all fairly knowledgeable, and maybe just a little bit cynical as well. And so I actually said to them, if I'm going to be teaching you presentation skills, I've got to be able to model what I'm expecting you to do. And at any stage during my presentation, I want you to stop me and say, what are you doing now? Explain to me what's going on in the background. And sometimes I did it, and sometimes I stepped out and just did it myself. So, for example, when they got together, I presented them some information, and then about morning tea time, I said, oh, now, I wouldn't normally go into this in this level of detail, but you're obviously a really, really smart group. So I want to share this with you now. I have always intended to share that with them. but I've found the basic principle of labelling. If I label a group as being smarter than average, then they will pay more attention, and they're more likely to clear that information. Now, half an hour later, I told them what I did, and I said, do you resent me for that? And they said, no. They said, we understood why you were doing it. Your intent was pure, but that's pure audience manipulation.
Yeah.
Straight up. I mean, if I'm involved in a negotiation with someone, I will sometimes manipulate them to help them to negotiate better. So I don't want to out-negotiate you. Because if I'm going to do a deal with you, then I want that negotiation to be equally as successful for both of us. If I out-negotiate you by using maybe my superior experience or skills, you mightn't realise it immediately, but sooner or later you'll realise that I out-negotiated you.
Yeah.
The minute you realise that, you resent me. And every interaction we're going to have from that point forward becomes a toxic relationship, and my life becomes hell. Because every time I talk to Tony, things are difficult. Yep. And in a world where every deal has to be renegotiated.
Yeah, we have spoken about this again earlier, but can you talk about this negotiation as an ongoing process rather than an event?
Oh,
I think it was a really interesting.
It is. There are a lot of people who are silly enough to actually think I can act differently in a negotiation to the way that I act normally, because it's just a negotiation. And maybe that's what they've done in the past, and maybe it worked for them. And I will actually say to you in the early part, if we're going to make this deal work, then it's based on a 1-year contract that we're going to try and agree on. We've got to make sure that that actually works for both of us. And I'm going to be assuming that the way you treat me in this negotiation is exactly the same way as you're going to treat me for the rest of the time of the contract. Just to let you know,
clear boundaries.
yeah, just to let you know, this, if you're going to make life difficult for me, then I'm more likely to walk away and go and look at my alternatives rather than try and work through this with you. Because in today's uncertain world, there will always be areas where we need to come together and sort out some grey area to our mutual satisfaction.
Yeah.
And in fact, with smart companies now, they're actually building in the renegotiation triggers. They're actually saying, okay, once the inflation rate goes beyond a certain point, once the rates in this area go beyond a certain point, that is so you've agreed in advance when you will sit down and renegotiate. Because otherwise, two parties will never want to renegotiate at the same time. There will always be one party that wants the renegotiation and the other one that's suiting them at the moment, so they'll just try and look it as long as they possibly can.
It reminds me a little bit of when Adam and I first started our business partnership. One of our mentors said to us, look, you're going into partnership, most businesses fail, and as a result most partnerships fail, and then as a result most friendships fail. It's really worth thinking through your process now in terms of how you're going to manage 4 things. Divorce, death, disability, departure and disagreement. You said if you can nail those 4 things when everything's rosy and everything, you're really excited by the business and all that sort of stuff, then you'll have a process laid down that you both agree to, and you can follow that process and hopefully take some sting out of it. We're still in business 15 years later. It's even better, and nearly 35 years of friendship or something like that as well, so that's pretty awesome. But that defining the triggers in advance, or the process in advance, seems to me like a really
good fences
very
built
smart
good neighbours. And you need to build a fence in the good times, not when you actually need it.
Yeah. So back to the crafting of a presentation.
Okay, so two things. So at the top of the page, before I write anything else, it will be what is the one thing that they will remember after my presentation after they've got everything else. If someone was to do an exit poll of the room after I've been speaking, and I was asking everyone the same question, what did you take away from that? I want them all to be pretty much giving a similar answer. So if they're only going to remember one thing, I've got to determine what it is, not let them make the choice, because then there's no control over that. And to be able to do that needs a lot of audience analysis. In my experience, most people fail because of a lack of audience analysis. when they don't have enough audience analysis, when they don't understand their audience well enough, they don't understand what motivates this audience, they don't understand what their common areas are of concern, of interest, of their common attitude is, then you tend to overcompensate with information. And you know, how much information did you have in your initial presentation, and how much was left by the time you finished with it?
Like,
Yeah, and that's why it does start, because that narrowing down that process.
Absolutely.
But if you can narrow it down, basically saying, how does this all fit to my core message, then you've got inherent congruence and people get it.
Yeah.
If you're putting things in because, oh, that's interesting, or that's interesting, and I haven't heard that before, or some people may not have heard that, which is what's known as, in the speaking game, a scattergun approach. You know, I don't know which bits are going to be interesting to the audience, so I'll throw out lots of stuff. And some bits will be interesting to some people. I'm not sure which bits, I'm not sure who, but I might just get lucky and some people will find this an interesting experience. Unfocused, people walk out of the room thinking that person knows an awful lot about this topic, but what the hell is it doing to me? What was it all about?
And I remember when we first started crafting my story, it was very much there were the two things. One, and you kept banging on about that question, what's the one thing you want people to take away? And it took me a while to even
Banging
figure
on
that
about
out.
it's a bit unkind.
No,
I understand
you kept coming back, coaching me through it. The other thing that you said as well was start with the conclusion.
Yep.
So, and that was the first time I had ever heard that even from you. Was start with the conclusion. And can you walk us through that principle?
I am amazed how little I see other people who work in this area focus on that. The great, Dr. Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. Where am I going to end up? If I know where I'm going to end up, if you go on a journey and you don't know where your end point is, how efficient is your path on that journey? And most people fall into that trap. They don't know what their end point is, and they know their opening better than they know their conclusion. And I can remember second or third meeting that we had, and I said, so what have you been practicing on? Well, I'm going to start with this. Where are you going to finish? Well, I haven't thought about that yet. Which is a failure on my part.
Oh no, you drummed it home eventually and the message came in loud and clear.
And as you found, didn't you? Because we will all lose our way. I've done too many roadshows where I'm doing the same presentation 8, 10, 12 times. Every time I will lose my way. And every time it's in a different spot. The fact, there's research that shows that once you've lost your way in one part, the brain self-corrects and makes sure that you don't lose your way there ever again. But it will be somewhere else. You just can't predict what it is.
That's exciting.
What I found is when I lift something out, next time if I lift it out, guess what, it went just as well. So it probably wasn't all that necessary anyhow. So I was breaking it down to that core, understanding the audience well enough. And we're working at the moment in the new senior curriculum that's coming in for students in Queensland. All the poor, what I call the teachers call the guinea pig generation, who are in year 11 at the moment. These were the first ones that did prep school, the first ones to do year 7 in high schools. They've basically been experimented on with their entire educational life. And they're the ones going to be the first to be assessed under the ACAR, rather than the old OB sort of system that we have here in Queensland. And there are specific persuasive presentations that they have to give, which count towards their final mark, that will give them their university entrance score. And so we're trying to help teachers teach the principle of the persuasive presentation to students. And we're being quite brutal now. And I think in a couple of weeks' time we go to the English Teachers Association of Queensland to launch this new program. And it basically is, first step is audience analysis. Second step is what is your call to action? What are you going to ask of this audience to actually do? This is a conclusion. We've actually got them writing the conclusion before they even think about what their opening is, before they think about what other content it is. And it's a very simple process. What do you know about them? What do they have in common? What are their common interests? Given the topic you're going to be speaking about, what can you ask them to do and have a reasonable expectation that they will do it? That's your call to action. That's your conclusion. Then all the other bits fall in place. What motivate them to do what you're going to ask them? What support material can you have that's going to reinforce that call to action? But it's actually with students, getting them, second thing they write down in the 9-step process is, how will I finish? And as I said, I was starting to say before, when we're talking about going through so many presentations, when you lose your way, if you know where you're going to end up, it is so much easier to get back on track. If you know your opening best, you tend to go back and you go into that recycle sort of mode. Do you know what I mean? Any Catholics in the room? You know what I mean when I say Hail Mary syndrome? I mean, you stop a Catholic halfway through the Hail Mary, ask them to finish, they can't do it. They've got to go back to the start. It just won't move. It just comes out of the mouth. We're thinking about it. And unfortunately, most people try to use the same modality with their presentation. And so when they lose their way, they go back to the start, madly trawling through and hoping they'll get the next bit. Whereas, forget about that, know where you're going to end up.
And do you write out in full, like word for word, when you start, or do you suggest that to you?
I think there's two kinds of speech writers. There are those who need to write it out word for word. There are those who are naturally extemporaneous speakers, so they're able to just have a series of bullet points, have a train of thought, and they'll put the words around them. The dangerous thing for those, but sometimes I fall into both. If I'm doing a totally new area, it doesn't happen often, but I'm making a new part of an area, I will often write the entire thing out just as a process of getting my thoughts in order, trying to think about the right words.
Yep.
But I can never use those words or that script in the presentation.
Yep.
Because otherwise it will, it's not recognising the really important difference between the written word and the spoken word. There's a wonderful documentary on ABC television at the moment. You can look it through iView, which is a documentary about Graham Freudenberg, one of the greatest speech writers that has ever been alive in Australia. In the first 5 minutes of the documentary, he actually says, the thing that allowed me to do what I do was I recognised the difference between written language and spoken language. Most people write speeches that were meant to be read, but they were never meant to be said.
Yes.
And so we have to go, if you're going to write it out, we have to recognise the fact that we tend to think the way that we write, which is the way that our writing practice has all been.
Can I give a little hack to that, actually, Kevin, and hat tip to James Charlesworth, who's up the back. But he introduced me to Google Speak, which will take your voice and turn it to text straight away. And it's an amazing tool in Google Docs, and it will transform your life. It'll certainly transform mine. But it's a way of actually, instead of writing it out, you speak it out, but you get a full documented transcript of what you just said. And so you get all the guff and you get the rawness of it, and then you've got something to work back and refine from. Because often, to me anyway, when I'm thinking about it, even a new presentation, the daunting part is the empty page, right? And I don't know, having learned a fair bit about writing as well over the years, they say people get writer's block, but they never get speaker's block. So speak it out. And I found that a neat little hack for A, getting started, and B, documenting the flow.
Very, very few people have the skill of being able to write something in a way that sounds conversational.
Yeah,
I suggest those people
your own style and your personality in the
are
process.
reading a fortune as script writers, maybe in Hollywood or somewhere else.
Yep.
But I remember times when I was with my partner in the schools, Adrian Pauly, and we were creating, so they're right, we were creating a CD-ROM to show debating and to And we were trying to replicate a debate, and we had these two scripts in front of us, because we had to give the scripts to the teachers to be able to teach it, and it was sad. It was, we wasted a long time in a recording studio, basically with a couple of cranky-old babies reading stuff to each other. It was horrible, and we eventually realised we could not write it and sound natural. And eventually we just threw the script away. So listen, we'll just go in there, just do it, and then get somebody else to transcribe what we've said. And then it becomes natural, which is really just the early version of Google Speak.
Yeah. And when, let's talk about fear for a second, because I think, when you think of public speaking, it's often ranked as one of the top fears in people's lives, sometimes above death. And I went looking for some hard data around that, but I couldn't really find anything convincing. But certainly people talk about that.
People can relate to it.
Relate to it, yeah. So how do you address that in your clients, and how do you think about fear? What do you still get afraid when you're up to speak?
I think you have to acknowledge the fact that no matter how experienced you are, and again, most people have heard of Alan Peace. Alan Peace is 40-something now. Good friend is on the Sunshine Coast. Speaks mostly in Eastern Europe now. And I said, Alan, does imposter syndrome ever go away? And he said, no, it doesn't. Every now and again, the little negative voice just goes in there. You're crap. You're just going to waste their time. And
that was me at lunchtime
and I think as long as you can keep it in perspective, because the worst thing would be to be arrogant enough and think, okay, I know what they need to hear. I'm a repository of all wisdom in this room. So you need to keep that in perspective.
I think I find that enormously reassuring that a man of your experience still gets it.
At least once a year, I'm stuck in a hotel room somewhere, simply not able to sleep. And that's because I'm going to be doing maybe some new content, and I'm not sure I haven't had a chance to test run, or I've got an audience where I don't believe I've been able to get enough information to truly understand them. And just a classic sleepless night. And I have to think, the only way I'll ever get back to sleep is I'll have to actually sit up and do some more work on my presentation. I'll have to change the slide, I'll have to do something, and feel like I've actually done some action.
Yes.
Just well, action overcomes anxiety. The other thing that it's taught me is it's never as bad in the room as I imagine it to be. It's never going to be as bad as that. But I have to do something. And again, about once a year. And I just see that as, okay, that's just respecting the fact that I'm taking up people's time. My attitude is if we waste 1 minute here in this room, we're not wasting 1 minute, we're wasting 40 minutes. A minute of every person.
That's right, mate. So just dial it up, thanks.
So, as the MC, I would find it very intimidating.
I love it. And in terms of, so you've spoken about this 5 minute study. And
the 5 minute and 30-second period.
Yeah, the 5 minute 30-second period. Walk us through your rule there.
Okay. Basically, it's about complete control over a 5 minute and 30-second period, which is the first 30 seconds of your presentation and the 5 minutes immediately before you speak. So if you can...
Sorry, just to interject, does that also include sales, like sales meetings, negotiation sort of meetings? Is it all of the...
every presentation.
Yep, same.
Every presentation. Because as I said, when I first started speaking training, every presentation was done standing up to a room of 2 to 20 to 100 people. Now, at least a third, probably more like half of the presentations that I'm training people for will be done with them sitting down, speaking to maybe 4 people sitting around the table, with 10 people being beamed in from other parts of the world. And in more challenging, generally with those people a week to 10 days in advance, having had the full business proposal, so they've had a chance to read it, get their negative attitude towards it, build up all of their incorrect assumptions about what they think about it. When I'm training those people, it's a case of, okay, these people have had this for a week, they've had it, you know, they're responsible people, they will have read all the content there. This will have caused them to have an opinion, probably, and again, the wonderful quote from my hero, Hans Rosling, Professor of Health Demographics from the Karolinska Institute of Sweden, which is, the problem with the world is not ignorance, it's incorrect assumptions. The problem is not that people don't know things, it's what they think they know is wrong. And how do you deal with that? And most of the presentation now is based on addressing the incorrect assumptions, or telling them what they should focus on out of a whole raft of information.
So let's jump back to the 5:30.
Okay.
What's your 5:30?
Okay, we'll work backwards. It's 30 seconds.
Yep.
The 30 seconds is the first 30 seconds of the presentation. So no surprises in the first 30 seconds of the presentation. Nothing can catch you by surprise. You will know who you're going to make eye contact with. You will know what sort of eye contact you get back from them. So when I first get up in front of the room, ideally if I can, if I'm walking in front of them, or if I'm standing there, I'll take the next couple of seconds, look out there, smile at the room. When you smile at a group of people, some people will smile back. I want to see which ones smile back because they're the ones who are going to get the eye contact. There will always be somebody, present company accepted of course, there will always be somebody in the room who doesn't want to be there. All right, they planned on being there, or they got sent there. One of the first questions I'll ask when I'm doing in-house training program, who's self-selected and who was sent? You need to understand that. And what was I talking about?
The 5 minutes.
Oh, the 5 minutes.
Yeah, so we've got the first 30 seconds.
And so those are the ones, I might only make eye contact with 2 or 3 people around the room for the first 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to take a chance on making eye contact with the one person who has just had an SMS from their partner saying they don't want to be their partner anymore, and then expecting to get home and find the lost change and all of their belongings out of the front footpath. They're having a bad day. I just have to remind myself, it's not my fault, it's not my problem, and I have to leave them alone, otherwise I will see the look on their face, I will make the false causal link of, oh shit, I've only started speaking and they hate me already. And that's just going to diminish my confidence.
Yeah.
So complete control over the first 30 seconds. How you actually walk to your speaking position. Take a slower, longer walk. How you actually stand before you say your opening words. And I think you and I did a lot of work in the early days on what we call the speaker neutral stance.
Yeah, let's walk through that.
Okay.
Slash not walk.
No, everyone's you've been sitting for too long. Okay, everyone's standing up, please. And what we need is we need our feet shoulder distance apart. We need our toes pointing slightly out. We need our weight evenly balanced on both feet. We are standing up as tall as we possibly can. Imagine the model strip of a little wire pulling you up as tall as you can possibly be. Hands are at your sides. From there you can do the best gesture. Known to speakers, which is the palms up, hands out gesture. Hello everyone, I'm an open on the speaker. You'll be fascinated with everything that I say. The main thing about that is the lower part of the body. Upper part of the body in body language creates engagement. Lower part of the body creates credibility. And so what people
Can you
do
please say it again? Sorry.
upper part of the body creates engagement. This is where all the gestures come from. This is where the movement comes from. This is where the hip movement comes from. So that's engagement. The lower part of the body carries credibility. And this has been shown, and again, this is from the realms of NLP and other research that's been done, that if I stand here and I shift my weight ever so slightly, one way or the other, just like this, or like that, I'm actually, your mind is seeing me as being less grounded. What I'm saying during that time is less credible. And so it comes down to if I'm going to be walking around during the presentation, when will I actually stand still with the weight evenly balanced on both feet to say that key point, because then I'm giving that key message, the physical reinforcement that means it's more likely to be captured and retained. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And I'm sure you've seen it. You know, there's so much nervous energy going on, there's so much adrenaline rushing about. We have to control it, because if you don't control it, it will come out in some way and it will be really obvious to the audience. You know, you see people who move their feet like this. Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah.
You know, now where's the attention going? I can be doing wonderful stuff up here, but everyone's saying, oh shit, the poor boy. You know, it's going to the toilet or something. You know, and again, there's this nervous energy coming out in a way that's not controlled. Why do you have your toes pointing slightly out? Because when you move, you need to move laterally to the audience, moving back and forward. If I keep coming out like this, all right, and then keep going back again, number one, I'm going to be talking whilst words are coming out. I'm going to be walking backwards whilst I'm speaking. You can't walk backwards while you're saying anything that you help people will take with some sort of credibility. What I'm going to tell you now is really doesn't work. Right? But a lot of times people do that. They'll be speaking to a group, maybe a U-shaped table. They'll come down to try and connect with the people at the very end, and then they'll realise they need to get back here. I'm cutting out these people here, and in doing that, they keep talking. Shut up! There's a reason why God creates little spaces in your mind where you lose your way. It's to give the audience pauses. Audiences love pauses. It's only speakers who hate pauses. Because you want to get up there and blurt out what you've got to say as quickly as possible. Pauses are when they think. Pauses are when they change their mind. Pauses are when they internalise. Write your pauses. Don't let them happen by accident. Sorry. Excuse me for going into the grades.
No, that's great. Great. I mean, that gestures and the movement and stuff is so interesting.
And it's aligning that. So in other words, what is the key message I want them to take away?
Yeah.
That's got to be said in one short, succinct sentence.
Yes.
And it has to be said at least 3 times in the presentation. Opening, conclusion, and somewhere during the body. I've done 7-minute presentations where I've said the same phrase 17 times. And I'm constantly say yes, 2 little words. Pure motivational speech. It got to the point of where, and again, this was a contest that I was in, and I realised, again, it took me a number of deliveries to realise that I questioned the audience members after this presentation, and nobody ever said I was saying it too much, so I knew that I wasn't crossing the line there, but I also realised that I was reinforcing it, and if I could get the audience to actually say it, then it would be much more powerful. So it was actually based around an old line from a Liza Minnelli song, if anyone, which is, see if I can remember it. When life keeps throwing challenges your way, you never know what to say. You'll never win if you never play. Say yes. It's a paraphrase. Yeah. And I use that quote at the start. I gave 4 or 5 examples where this person said yes when they could have otherwise said no. Yeah. But then I turned it around at the end. And I said to the audience, and so when an opportunity comes your way, what are you going to say? And I just put my hands out like that, and everyone went, yes. So that's different when you can actually get the audience actually repeating something for you.
Yeah, cool. And in terms of then back to the 5 and 30.
5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's still there, but I think it's important 5 minutes 30.
The 5 minutes before.
Yeah, let's talk about the 5 minutes before.
The 5 minutes before, for me, is very simple.
What does your 5 minutes look like?
Simply your feet. And just to reinforce that feet solidly on the floor.
Okay.
You know, I've had
Everyone
speakers
join in.
what I want to do is I want to actually put the Velcro on their shoes, you know, stick them down there. But when you're doing the presentation sitting down, still keep those feet like that. Don't start doing this sort of stuff, you know, or swinging the legs if there's the room to do that, because it impacts on your overall credibility.
So even under a table.
Even on the table, like, they're not seeing it,
Sure.
but it's just impacting on, yeah. Have a look at the stuff done by Amy Cuddy on how positive body language can impact our mind. It's the first real research we've seen that shows faking it till you make it does actually work. Because you've just got to find the right process. But the 5 minutes for me is slow deep breathing. Now, I don't get too sophisticated with this. It's slow deep breathing to do two things. Number one, to exhibit control over yourself physically. So as you're slowing your body down, because in doing that, you will most likely slow your mind down. Because the problem is the adrenaline's rushing, your mind is racing. The number of times I've seen people with really wonderful speeches stand up in front of the group and blurt out their opening too quickly. When nobody in the room has had a chance to get used to their voice, they're not in tune with them, and so most of the audience actually miss the opening. Now this is hell for a speaker, because you're thinking, wow, that was my opening, and it didn't go over very well, and I think that was the best part of my presentation. It's all downhill from now on. And it wasn't that it was a lousy opening, it was just that it was said too quickly because they didn't control the adrenaline rush that naturally happens whenever we stand up in front of the group. So it's slow, deep breathing, and then just thinking about the preparation that you've done, because that little negative voice will come in.
And do you do that do you try to find a quiet place to do that, or?
Just when you're sitting there, you know, maybe in the room waiting for your chance to be invited up to speak.
Would anyone be interested in doing a short little breathing exercise? We did it actually at the last event. Would you be interested? Like it's a really short mindfulness exercise, 2 minutes probably.
And yeah, it was when I was actually talking to you about your mindfulness exercise that I actually started realising, okay, there's something which is the next level up from what I'm doing in the...
it's. I mean, there's just so much science around.
Yeah, well, it's just it's a rag amateur as opposed to the professional athlete.
Well, let's all do it together, because it is a really short 2 minute exercise, and it's something you can do in nearly any environment. And essentially, we'll take your power foot position. What did you call it? What did you call the foot position? Open stance. Speaking neutral stance.
Yeah.
And you can
obviously you.
I was really paying attention.
I obviously articulated it very clearly, so you remember it. Yeah.
So speaking neutral stance, and you can do it standing up or sitting down. But what I'll do is I'll take you through 3 breaths, and it's a 4 count in and an 8 count out. And then at the end of that, I'll ask 3 questions. And it's all about really coming into the present, and I've certainly found it useful many times over. And it was an exercise that Jonah shared in the last event, who's a performance psychologist, and it seemed to me a really easy gateway into mindfulness. So let's get started. Hands wherever you like. I'm going to close my eyes just for the sake of it. And so if we all breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And just before you move, I'd like you to, you've been sitting on those chairs for nearly 90 minutes now. I'd just like you to sort of really note the sensation of the chair against the back of your legs. And see what that really feels like. Now I'd like you to shift your attention to the back of your left hand and the skin and the air temperature on the back of your left hand. How does that feel? Just notice that. And now pay attention to the sounds you can hear in the room. Just notice those too. And then, when you're ready, in your own time, just come back to the room. Okay. So that's a little 2-minute mindfulness that I've used before presentation, absolutely. And
you and I haven't spoken about the alignment between these two little activities. But the one thing that you really do, which I could probably do more of, which is reinforce the fact that what it's doing is putting you in the room. Always, you probably heard me say, make the presentation live in the room. How can you create a unique experience? Even though you might be giving this same presentation in a number of different environments, how can you make it a unique experience for the people in the room? Because if it's not a unique experience for them, then just record the damn thing, put it up on YouTube, and let them watch it in their own time. There's nothing special about it. And I like to get to a room early, and I will quite often, and this is again why the conclusion very rarely changes, because that's what I want to say, but at least half the time I've realised my opening changes. Because it will be something that's happened in the room, something that somebody has said, which, massively, I think, increases the credibility of certainly the attention-getting ability of what's being said. Because people realise, we can only say that here. This is big creative for us. This is something a bit more special.
Yeah.
Now, going back to those, the preparation,
Yeah.
the one thing that I put at the top of the page is, what is the one thing they're going to remember after they've forgotten everything else?
Yes.
And then I make sure that everything I say in the presentation relates back to that one sentence. So you don't create this sort of this ongoing narrative where people hop on and off. I like presentations, and I think I'm not there being other people say this before. You've got to write a presentation allowing for the fact that people are going to switch off at some stage during the presentation, and they need to switch back on again. And people's lives are busy.
Yes.
And if you really want them to internalise some things that we were talking about, they're going to stop listening to you while they're internalising that. You might inadvertently mention something. I might mention, cooking dinner tonight, and there'll be somebody in the room going, I don't remember turning off the stove this morning, and they're wondering whether their house is burning down. It's so easy to trigger a random thoughts like that, which will distract them, or maybe even have them thinking about something. I mean, again, I'm old enough. I can remember the early days when people were in the room and they'd be checking their phone, and you can see the blue lights that are going up onto their face. And you let them know that you are aware of that and make them feel guilty without trying to embarrass them in front of the entire room. I can remember that's about 6 years ago when I saw someone doing that, and I was just about to start to study on him, and he put his hand up. He said, by the way, I'm just talking about one of your books, and you've actually said this. And I thought, okay, that's engagement.
Yeah.
No, it's not an engagement that maybe my generation gets involved in, but it's engagement for that generation. Who am I to judge?
Yeah.
So I've got to accept that and factor that in whenever I'm working on that. So how do you create this presentation which allows people to get off, think about their own stuff, and then get back on board again and still be on the same track? And I think that's why you need to have this really powerful internal content where everything relates to one key point, not just relating to each other.
It's
And then-
forgiving of the audience too.
Yeah.
Which is, I like that.
Yeah, and then side by side with that is the second question that I must answer for myself, which is, how do I want them to feel at the end? So what's the one thing I want them to remember after they've forgotten everything else, and how do I want them to feel at the end? How they feel at the end will determine what they do about it. So it's both a content sharing journey, but also an emotional journey.
I love that. And that's
and you have to meld those two. There's one without the other. I mean, I was at a mining engineering conference about 3 years ago. I was the final speaker, and I was able to open, and I actually sat through the previous 2 days. It was the longest days of my life. And I was actually able to get up and actually say to them, you know, I'm intimidated by the fact that I'm your final speaker here in the plenary room, and I'm the first speaker that's actually using a slideshow, not based on an Excel spreadsheet. They've been sitting there for 2.5 days looking at Excel spreadsheets. I'm not sure how sure you can help anybody's life. But I hope to be able to shock them by realising, how much do you remember? Who can remember what was on the spreadsheet, you know, day one? Nobody.
Row 10, column D.
And I'm recently working with, because I'm working with a lot of groups now where they need to be able to transmit and show data. And you know, their knowledge of, or how can we show that data, you know, was basically, pie chart, bar graph, organisational chart or a flow chart. Well, that's it. Well, that's all we've ever needed. Well, you can probably incorporate all your content in those 4 modalities, but it's going to get pretty boring for people after a while.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
actually, sorry, just to reference, Kevin's got a whole bunch of resources that we'll be sharing as well as part of what will ultimately be the event notes.
yeah.
And one of those is those things.
I've actually, so I did it for them because I was so concerned, and it changes all the time. So you'll get one of these, and we've actually shown 24 different ways in which you can graphically represent information, and hopefully there's a, you know, and what criteria you should use for each one of those to help people. You know, sometimes it's necessary,
Yeah.
but they don't have to be boring.
With that note, I would love to put it back to you all and see if we have any questions for Kevin. Would anyone like to start? Yes, we have one. Sorry, just 2 seconds and we'll grab the microphone. Thank you very much, Shannon.
Thanks. You need the politicians, right? They've got a story to sell and a vision to try and change the country. And, you know, we had Houston stumble on his GST on birthday cakes sell job, and then Shorten obviously struggled with his message this year. What could politicians learn out of being better communicators and creating the change that they want?
That's a great opener.
It is, yeah. I mean, they have a policy, and it's a policy, hopefully, that people have actually voted for. How are they going to articulate an enactment of that policy in a way that's going to get the greatest traction? I cannot think of a time in history when the political discourse has been more depressing. I'm seeing things reduced to levels of ridiculousness. I mean, both 2 politicians, one here in Australia and one in the United States, I'm not going to mention any names, but when they were challenged with the fact that what they had said was fundamentally untrue, their justification was, but that's what the people who voted for me believe. And this was somehow a justification, and I thought that was very dangerous. A time when is our politicians' role to be nothing more than a mindless voice for a certain group, or do we expect something higher than that? And they say, you know, in a democracy, people get the leaders that they deserve. I don't know what we've done to deserve our current crop. But I think the birthday cake with Houston was a good enough. That could have actually been very successful if he'd had enough warning and known that he wasn't going to fall into the trap like that. And that's the trouble, that we've become very cynical about politicians, and so the unfair questions from journalists, where we would probably think that was not a fair question to ask of maybe somebody else, is seen as a fair target for the politicians, because the politicians have all been media trained within an inch of their life to never answer the question. Just to say what they want to say and never actually answer the question. So I would like to think that eventually, it's just like the children of alcoholics will often be teetotalers after we've had the experience of what it's going like at the moment, where we really have the ultimate sort of incantation of boorishness in politicians, that there will be a swing back, where people will say, enough is enough, and my intelligence is being insulted here. The social media environment makes it very, very difficult. I've trained politicians. I'm not proud of it, but I've got a little living. And it is depressing. I mean, and I see it a lot, because I've been going back and forward to many Asian countries. And Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of Singapore, said no other country can learn from Singapore because they are so small. They can do things that can't be done elsewhere. But I was in Singapore the week that Lee Kuan Yew died, and I saw people queuing for 7 hours to view the body. And I saw an ad from the Tattooists Association of Singapore. I didn't even realise there was one. Basically, and I'll happily paraphrase it, but basically saying, you never agreed with what we did, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, but we always respected you. And I think to be able to have politicians where they can do what we don't like, but we still respect them, because we recognise that's what's necessary, I think that takes a certain maturity of the populace.
An intention. So,
Yeah.
an intention.
John, can we go to the mic?
And I feel horribly inadequate in giving that sort of answer to a very good question. I would like to see some improvement.
Kevin, Toby, thank you for your engaging presentation and credible. My name is John Barton. I have a question. Almost no one, you actually referenced this early on, almost no one likes having self-assessment done on their presentations, either just doing it on their own or having someone else, replay it, do a debrief, where Toby, in the sporting world, that's just the done thing, right? Everyone does that. So I wonder what insights you've got, Kevin, over your career about how you've got that from 2% to 4% willingness to... What have you seen work well?
I've got much greater willingness now, but what I've had to do is, I came in on, I've seen many programs where what they've done is they've videoed people as part of their presentation, and then they'll put them through the camera or through the data projector and put it up on the screen, and everyone will sit around and give people feedback. Now, whenever I've done anything like that type of activity, whenever the person who is speaking has been recorded, I will have them look at the video, and then I will give them the first right reply, because you've seen it. And then they will mention 30 things that they did wrong, never one thing that they did right. And 29 of them, nobody else in the room has noticed. And so there's a learning from that most of the mistakes that we make, we only see them. Most of the time when we lose our way, it takes an audience 2 to 2.5 seconds to realise that you've actually paused. It takes most people about a second when they lose their way to recover their way. But because your mind is not working in real time, you don't have a reality check there. So most of the time when speakers lose their way, the audience is not even aware of the fact that they lost their way. But you're feeling, or as a speaker, you're feeling guilty because you feel that that's another failure in your little memory test that you've actually set for yourself. What I will do now, because everyone's got a phone in the pocket of their handbag, is I actually don't record it onto a camera and show it through the data projector. I get them to record it on their own device. So they're only there looking at it, and it's only if they choose to let somebody else see it, they will do that, because I realise it's the fact that other people are going to be looking at you and analysing you that is the most intimidating factor. I will also make sure that points that are good are given by other audience members. And as the trainer, I'm the only one who gives points for improvement. Because I've seen so many people cruel by well-intentioned points for improvement. I was talking to a lady the other day, she was, I can't see T-Rex gestures. You ever done T-Rex gestures? Oh, I didn't go out, it's just all this. And I said, why are you doing that? And she said, oh, because I was once told, I said, why don't occasionally have the elbows come out from your body? She said, oh, once I was told I gestured too much. I said, oh, who told you that? Oh, since renunciation in grade 6. You're mid-40s, and that was rubbish information then, it's still rubbish information, but you're still remembering that, and it's still limiting your ability to be able to communicate effectively. So I make sure I will get audience members to give feedback on what they're seeing that's good. I will give feedback on points for improvement. I will never give any more than 2, maximum 3 points for improvement, even if I see 10, because it doesn't help people. It's every time somebody stands up in front of a group, it's either going to be confidence enhancing or confidence diminishing. There is no middle ground. And so for you as a speaker, it's your job to try and make it confidence enhancing, and certainly for me as a trainer or coach in this area, if I can't make you feel more confident next time, then it's a massive fail for me. I now give much more positive improvement rather than telling people, don't do this. I mean, Toastmasters is one organisation, and they'll actually say to people who say, occasional or ah too much, don't say or ah, simply turn it into a pause. And so these people go, don't say or ah, turn it into a pause. Don't say or ah, turn it into a pause. And they open their mouth. What's the first sound that comes out? I mean, or ah is not nearly as bad as most people make it out to be. All right, okay, is much worse. That's an approval seek. That's just showing that I don't have any confidence in what I'm actually sharing with you. But what I found is, if I tell people what they're doing well and get them to do more of it, then quite often I never have to tell them what they're doing wrong and get them to stop it. It's like telling a 3-year-old child, don't slam the door. What's the next sound you're going to hear? A slamming door. You want to be really honest? Come on, let's be brutally honest now. What's the word you're worried about saying too much tonight?
What was I about?
If I said something...
interesting. Sorry. I'll show you. I have it on my notes here, and I crossed it off.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because he was saying, I want to make sure I don't say interesting. So he wrote it down. I wrote it down. Don't say interesting. What was going to happen?
Yeah.
The word was
JB, really tactically on that as well. In rehearsing for this most recent keynote, the new one, I was wandering around the streets of Toowong and through the cemetery and stuff, talking to myself and the dead people, and recording myself, and just little chunks at a time, because I think that's another intimidating part of the learning and the iteration and the feedback loop process, is that if you try to go 45 minutes of a keynote, you then have to listen back to all 45 minutes. So I broke it down into my intro, and I practiced that sort of 10 times, listen to it back. It's awful, but it's easy when you're just on your own. And then the conclusion, because Kevin told me I had to, and then and each of the key stories. So I just rehearse a single story over and over, which made it easier also in the kind of the overhead, I guess, of having to watch it back or to listen to it back. So I found those two remarks pretty useful too.
And that principle of chunking, I think, is really, really important. You break it up into chunks, and you remember the last couple of sessions that we worked on, I'd actually say to you, okay, let's start after this story. Let's start 10 minutes in. Start from there. You know, okay, I want to hear the 5 minutes before your conclusion and the conclusion.
Yeah.
Start from there. So I was dropping them into any part of the presentation as a way of preparing them for the fact that there's going to be some unexpected response, or some wonderful moment of spontaneity.
Yep.
And you need to be able to, you can't go back to the
Sort of
start.
knowing transitions as well in that process, I think, has been really useful.
Mm.
From my point.
But knowing the conclusion
Yeah.
best, and make sure that you're working towards the part of the presentation you know best, not away from the part of the presentation you know best. Most people are working away from the part of the presentation they know best, and they wonder why their confidence is diminishing and why the presentation ends up like a slowly deflating balloon. It's just coming down. Jeff?
I'm really enjoying learning more about this, these tactics and I'm not speaking very well. But the tips that you're giving, I guess, for public speaking and particularly for speeches. But what I'm really interested in is when you're in a boardroom type situation and you've prepared your speech or your pitch or your sales pitch. Often those are more like conversations, and so how do you maintain control of that conversation so that you are influencing people when often the conversation may get taken straight out of your hands right after that initial 30 seconds?
Great question. And it's nowadays I acknowledge. First of all, I find out, is there going to be a question and answer session? Is it a question and answer session, or are there going to be questions in the board type meeting, whatever they think of them, and whether they want to ask them. And there are some techniques you might be able to use to defer that. Yeah, that's a great point that you brought up there. You're just a bit ahead of me at the moment. I'll be coming to that in 5 minutes' time. Are you prepared to wait until I get there, and then if you've still got that question to ask it, or would you like me to cover it now? So I defer to the management in the room, otherwise it might be a career-limiting move. But I'd give them, they might then say, oh, okay, I can wait 5 minutes, and it allows me to keep it in context. But I would spend at least half the time now prepping people for the questions that are going to be asked. Most questions are predictable. If you sit down and think, okay, if I'm in a management position, here is our management our prerogatives, here is our current concerns at the moment, given that context, and I'm hearing about this, and I need to make a decision about this, what questions are likely to occur? And actually work on, often the last half day will be, let's put a big list up of all the questions you might be asked about that, and then one by one, I'll pick you totally randomly, and without any notice whatsoever, you'll be asked to answer that question or this question. And even though they might not get the exact same question, the feedback I'm getting is that it's always in the same area. And having done the practice of, if I'm asked a question about that, what needs to be said about that, and how might I structure that answer in a way that's going to efficiently and effectively respond to that. So it's actually preparing for the questions. Because what we found is the responses to the questions have about 3 to 5 times the credibility of the prepared stuff. It's like the editorial stuff in the newspaper has much more credibility than the ads. You know, your prepared stuff is the stuff that your sales stuff that you prepared, whereas the questions is what's really relevant to them. And when you get really clever, you'll actually structure your presentation so it engenders the questions that you actually want. So rather than actually you telling them that, you've actually got them asking the question you wanted them to ask. So you're sharing them the information, but in the context of an answer to a question rather than something you prepared. Because the mind can't resist an unanswered question. The minute somebody asks a question, a little window opens up in the mind ready for the answer. And so it's making it more likely that that information will be retained. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the questions aren't predictable. If they're predictable, then it's just cruel to put yourself into a situation where you haven't prepared for those.
Sometimes I get quite passionate when I'm speaking, and someone will ask a question, and I'll just go, "Oh, great question," and I sometimes then go, "Oh, was that over the top?" in terms of acknowledging them. Is there a technique that you say is best practice around acknowledging?
I think it's
a question.
If every question is a great question, I think it tends to be seen as just a platitude. I think occasionally with the really great questions, with others, just thank you for the question. I can imagine many other people would have actually thought about that. That's or use it as an opportunity for a compliment. That's very astute. That's very insightful. Thank you very much for bringing up that particular subject. So have a range of complimentary words.
Sure.
Or all the time I've been thinking about that subject, that has never actually occurred to me. Obviously, powerful lateral thinker. and no answer occurs to me right now, but I'm happy to stay here as long as you like afterwards, and we'll try and come up with an answer for you. But to continue on with this dialogue means that we may not finish on time, and so I just out of respect for everyone else. And again, principle there is, if I'm ever going to shut you down or need to control it, it's never done out of concern for myself. It's always got to be done out of concern for the audience. Because once I put it into that context, if somebody keeps going on, audience members shut them down, I don't have to. Because I'm in a very privileged position here, and if I even give anyone the hint that I'm abusing that privilege, then they will side with the other audience member against me.
Kevin, you mentioned the change from sort of face-to-face presentations to a mix of video conferences and people in the room.
Yes.
And often that connection that you get with your audience is obviously easier face-to-face.
Yes.
And a fully recorded presentation is different again, but where you have that mix of both, have you got any techniques for keeping that connection with the people on the video?
The people on the, and it will depend really whether you can see them or whether they're just watching you. In which case, it's not a lot different to a radio interview. You're sort of shouting down a dark hole and just hoping that there's something. To be able to ask for questions and ask specific people if they have any questions. Maybe you might be mentioning something that might be clearer to people in the room. And so I just wanted, for those outside the room, was that clear, or is there anything else that I need to be able to help you better understand that? I think it's recognising the fact that our body language has to be for the people who are on the camera. So you forget about the other people live in the room. The defining factor for your body language is those who can see you through the camera. Because if you start putting your gestures outside what they can see, then it's just disconnecting them. And again, it's the same with webinars and all of those. Use the facilities you've got there for people to ask questions. Maybe encourage them to text questions in, or to, if they've got that facility, to maybe send them a little message service, other questions, so they can ask questions, and encourage them to do that whilst you're still speaking, rather than they have to wait. Otherwise they get bored and they go to check their emails, and it's only when you hear the clicking of the keys that you realise that they're not paying attention. Does that?
Thank you. Yeah, it does. Thank you. That's right.
But it's become almost the standard modality now. And scarily, in some of those presentations they're doing for schools now, they're actually allowing the students to do their presentations to their smartphone, sitting in their bedroom. Which is good in some ways, but really bad in other ways.
Probably got time for 2 more questions, I think.
Let's get one here. Kevin, great presentation, thank you. You mentioned one of the techniques is to analyze your audience by looking at them, smiling at them, and decide who you're going to make eye contact with. So my question is, is there any other techniques you can use to analyze your audience, and also how you can feedback the audience that you analyze into your presentation immediately?
If it's appropriate, I'll do a survey beforehand. I'll use SurveyMonkey or something like that to send out, some questions. I keep it to maybe 2 or 3 multiple choice questions and 1 or 2 free form answering questions. And one will always be, what's the main thing you want to be able to get from this particular presentation? I will quite willingly go to audience members that I can contact, and I will call them up and I'll say, oh, by the way, I realise you're going to be in the room for a presentation I'm giving in a couple of days' time. I really respect your experience and expertise, but I have a couple of minutes of your time just to run some ideas past you. Because if I can do some way of putting my foot in the water, testing that out, it's like with humour. People sort of think, oh, for humour to work, everyone in the room is going to be hearing it for the first time. No, that's probably a really bad way, and a high risk approach, which is often going to cause you to fail. So I'll talk to audience members and say, listen, I'm going to think about using that joke. Do you think it's appropriate? I want to make sure I don't offend anyone. And they'll laugh, and then guess what? Next time when I'm telling the joke, they'll actually laugh louder. And they'll laugh sooner than anybody else because they get it, and then other people follow them. In any audience, there are the really smart ones who get the joke. There are those who didn't get the joke but heard other people laugh, and so they then realise it's a joke. And then there are those that never get the joke, but because everyone else in the room is laughing, they laugh along as well. So it's being able to use all of that. But the principle is trying to test run parts of it, and even to the point of sometimes rearranging the room. If I've been able to talk to some people and they are positive to what I'm going to present, and it's quite controversial, or maybe I might struggle to get approval from everyone, I will try and talk to the informal leaders in the group. I will then set up the room in a semicircle so people can actually see each other. Because I want people, whilst I'm saying something, to see the informal leaders with a positive look on their face, because I know that when they're doing that, I'm more likely to influence them. That's one of the main advantages. As I said before, presenting to a group is a lousy way of transferring information. It's a brilliant way of changing mindsets. But most of it is not done through what you're saying, but it's through the reaction of other audience members. And you're seeing other audience members react, and from that reaction, it changes your attitude to it. If I don't have a chance to do that, I'll set you up as you are now, where you can't see each other. So it's about making the environment work for you as well. But yeah, check it with other people. Don't make sure that everyone in the room is not hearing it for the first time.
Thanks everyone. We might cut questions there. I am conscious of making sure that I hit my 8:30 deadline with you. Kevin, if there was only one advice, one piece of advice that you want people to take away about influence tonight, what would that be? Prepare your presentation, prepare your negotiation. One of the things I'll be sending out, if people want it, is... so all of this will be emailed and there'll be the video and all that sort of stuff after.
Sorry, is there anybody who doesn't want it? It's a 2-page negotiation preparation checklist. I was working with the group, about 2 minutes to tell the story?
Yes.
Working with the group many years ago, going down to Canberra, trying to get approval for AusAid programs through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. These were multi-million-dollar projects. They would generally have 1 or 2 people from Australia and maybe 1 or 2 people from whatever country was going to be involved in this project. They'd all meet at the Canberra airport, hop in a taxi, drive out to some government office, and then 3 hours later walk away with their tail between their legs, wondering why they weren't winning any projects. The simple change was I convinced them to get the earlier flight in to book a room at the at the Canberra airport and then the Qantas Lounge or wherever we can find somewhere, have a 1.5 hour meeting deciding on a unified approach to this. They won $50 million worth of projects in the next 12 months. Just lack of preparation. People who go into a negotiation with the attitude, I've negotiated before, I'll just use the techniques I've used in the past, and I'll just get whatever I can and hope it goes well. Just, you know, the number of C-level executives I run into who are negotiating multi-million-dollar deals and they never even read one book on negotiation is seriously scary.
Prepare.
Prepared. Prepared. And I hope, you know, with the handouts that we'll give them, there are things that I think might be most useful to you in preparing and in going through the 5 steps in the negotiation process in a way that's most likely to get the outcome that you want.
Thank you very much for that. And where can people find you, Kevin, on the interwebs if they want to find out more? Or
We'll just get kevinryan.com.au or Ryan and Associates.
Okay. Great. And then the links will be available. And
yeah, when we set that stuff out,
we'll share that.
It's all there.
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm running 1-day workshops on negotiation and on presentation skills. Generally every couple of months.
Yep.
I keep them in very small groups.
Okay.
So for presentation skills, it's a maximum of 8. For negotiation skills, we keep it to about 12, maybe 14, because I want to make sure that people get high level interaction and personal feedback.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and big round of applause.
And Liz and everyone else, you know, that's supported him. Like I said to you at the start of the day, or tonight, you know, if this is terrible, you're not going to get invited out to dinner for at least 12 months. Because we've destroyed your relationship with all of your friends. I hope you get some dinner invitations.
Thanks, mate. And yeah, my thanks to Liz as well. She always helps me pull these things together and is super helpful in that regard. Andy Sutton on the video as well. Thanks, Andy, for your help there. Kevin, it has been another great conversation and always a pleasure. Thank you, mates.
And also we've forgotten Shannon and my wife Marie.
Shannon and Marie as well, yes, absolutely. Thank you. There's been a lot of people that have made this possible. So thank you to you all.
And all of you for turning up.
Exactly. Mainly, thank you to you guys for showing up and making it worthwhile. So thanks again. Cheers.